Welcome, Mr. Stanley Matthews, and to the students. You're welcome to this special session. This session is with Stanley Matthews. If I had to go through everything that is done, it's really a lot. It's done a lot of work in football in Africa over the last 15, 20, 30 years. And Stanley, you're welcome. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, as we kick off this session?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be with everybody today. Yeah, I'm Stanley Matthews. I've been with a club in South Africa called SuperSport United for 20 years, so a long time. I had a little spell in between when I left the club and was the Chief Executive Officer of the Premier Soccer League in South Africa. But basically the last 2 decades of my life have been immersed in South African and African football. Since 2007, I've been working on the continent for SuperSport television in various territories over the years where we've had broadcast interests from Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, so up and down the continent, working with the leagues, working with the clubs, trying to build a product, if I can say, as close to a model of the English Premier League as we can get, because the English Premier League and Champions League and that type of global football dominates corporate spend, dominates fan interest, dominates the sport. And for us as Africa to break through, we have to obviously offer similar or better standards if we want to be held in that kind of company. So, certainly from a Premier Soccer League of South Africa's point of view and a SuperSport broadcast point of view, we've worked very, very hard on our product here to make sure that it's a world-class product. We've got a 24-hour local football channel that we run here on our DSTV platforms. We cover all the games of the Premier Soccer League here in South Africa, so a lot of television exposure and sponsored cup competitions. We've got a vibrant football market in that sense. And, we've built that product over 20 years. That's been the core of my job, to look after the variety of football properties that SuperSport has in the broadcast space, and also on the ground, a lot of corporate social investment projects that SuperSport's involved with, like the Let's Play initiative that rolls out throughout Africa. And, looking at ways to enhance the football landscape, because at the end of the day, if football in Africa is thriving, then, SuperSport's business is thriving. Our business is sport and entertainment. Our business is a vibrant football industry. And for as long as we can help try and promote vibrant football economies, up and down the continent, then we feel that we'll always have an attractive value proposition for our subscribers, to watch their homegrown local heroes, to immerse themselves in their local football league, and have a healthy football culture at grassroots level in Africa, because we've seen that at the high end of world football, African stars shine and excel and are able to trade their own with the very best in the world. And if we rank players like Aubameyang and Salah and players in the past, the Drogbas and Essiens and Eto's of the world, our football players on the African continent are as good as anything that the world has to offer. But if we then take that same analogy and move across into, for example, the league space or the club space, we can't claim the same type of excellence and flagship that we can point to say, look at that club. I mean, now with Al Ahly going to, claim bronze medal at the World Club Championships, that's fantastic. And that's the type of thing that we're looking for us to be able to say, that Africa represents a high level of excellence. But until our clubs generally, not just the top ones like Al Ahly, that's the club of the century, they're an exception. We have to look at the 99.9% of the clubs that are operating up and down the continent and the leagues, and say, are those leagues and are those clubs up to a standard where they could match themselves in Premier League company like Salah and Eto'o do on the field of play? Can we do that on the field of play? And I think in many ways, we've made a lot of improvements, and we've made a lot of strides forward, especially in global football terms, being awarded something like the 2010 World Cup, which was very meaningful to us here in South Africa, but I think for everybody on the African continent to get that recognition and to show that we can put on a world-class event like any other country in the world. And for me personally, having gone to the 2006 Germany World Cup, the 2010 World Cup here in South Africa, the 2014 in Brazil, and the 2018 in Russia, I was very fortunate to be at those World Cups. And I can say without hesitation, any level of fear, that the South African World Cup was as good as any of the World Cups that I've been to, and all the continents, no question about it. In fact, the atmosphere and the vibe and the unity and the celebration and enthusiasm of the African continent by far have crushed what I experienced in South America and in Brazil. It was one of the most disappointing features for me. The lack of vibe and spirit, flags and unity and bringing togetherness wasn't there. And it wasn't there in Russia either. So, the African World Cup had personality, it had spirit, it had energy, it had passion. And I think that, we've got to take that type of energy and make sure that we can live up to a standard of excellence off the field of play and create an environment around the world-class players, because we've seen that the continent can produce world-class players. So we have to, now match that, I think, and by improving a lot of the things off the field.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stanley. That's a very fitting opening. Now, the student here, the course is called Certificate in Sponsorship, Sports Marketing and Property Marketing. So it's very much around marketing, and you've touched on something at the beginning, which is a product. You spoke about the product. What is a product? So if we speak to football, and I like the fact that you narrowed down on football, but so if we look at football or handball or rugby, whatever it is, what is the product when we're talking sports in this case?
Well, I think now, in the past, sports represented something that blurred between leisure and recreation, and a little bit of lifestyle. We're in a very professional era of sport now, where sport is a commercial commodity. And if you don't apply a commercial model, if you don't have a viable model, if you don't have a value proposition of what you're offering the consumer, why should they buy into it? The world's changed in terms of technology and the interest of children. And sports across the board, not just football, you've mentioned handball as an example, volleyball, netball, basketball, and other sports in South Africa, sports like tennis and hockey that have become marginalized over the last years with lack of interest. You're fighting for space. That's what we're doing. We're fighting for space. We're fighting against the entertainment industry for space. We're fighting against musicians and artists that want to dominate the earphones and speakers of the children, of their tablets, of their phones. We're fighting with TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. We're fighting with Netflix and Amazon and Google. We're fighting, with the movie industry, Hollywood. We're fighting for the hearts, minds, and wallets of people. That's the only way that we can uphold an industry, is to capture their hearts and engage their minds and be highly relevant to them on a week-to-week basis. The connection of the English football fan, as an example, is very passionate and is very steadfast from one weekend to another. For many people, football isn't like that. It isn't a huge, all-consuming, obsessive passion. It's something as part of their overall lifestyle. And we have to make sure that we remain relevant, because once we become one of 3 or 4 or 5 interests to a person, the content that grabs and keeps that person is the content that's going to be interesting, that's engaging, that gives a platform for the fan to feel connected and a part of something, a part of a community. Now, if we don't offer that in the football space, they're going to take that into the TikTok space or into, their online virtual world space, because in the past, we only were fighting for real things. We were fighting for real mind share. I wanted a kid to come to my soccer game instead of going to the movie house. But now I'm fighting a virtual world. So even in the football space itself, my own club faces competition from my virtual e-gaming brand. My e-gaming brand threatens to become bigger than my actual football club. That's crazy. Now, but that's the real world that we're living in. Now, for old guys like me, it's a much harder world to connect to and to understand, because I came from a world of dial telephones and fax machines and telegrams. And today, technology is available, like you and me. We're speaking to each other across thousands of miles. And it's a different world. And the youth of today understand that world in a way that we, older folk, and especially in football administration, if we're honest, most of the football administration hierarchy up and down the continent and in world football are held in the hands of the elderly. Most of football leadership would be between the ages of 50 and 70 years of age. Now, that's the football leadership market. In every league, everywhere in the world, in Europe, in South America, in Africa, you'll see even some administrators close to 80, if not 80, and they're still in football. Football market and landscape has changed, and I think that for us as an industry and as sport, not just football, is to see how the young people can carry the retaining the very good parts and the integral parts that have kept the sports industry going for all these years, but understanding that the nature and the landscape of interest is changing. And for that change, if we're not prepared to roll with those punches, we're going to be left behind, and potentially even to a virtual world where you're scratching your head and saying, how can it be that my child is more interested in his online gaming experience and what's happening in that league, where, for example, he's given an opportunity as a 12-year-old to be a manager of Liverpool, buy and sell players across, negotiate with other managers on the game about prices and which players and player swaps and loans. When I was 12 years old, I was looking at a guy doing a shibobo, a skillful move, and getting all excited about just the football. It's moved now. And now it's moved into a virtual reality, and we have to merge those two worlds as we move forward on a macro level. And there's still so much work to do at grassroots of football in Africa, that to get to that next level of what I'm talking about now, is still probably, I would say, maybe 8 to 10 years away from the continent where we are. But in Europe, they're playing in that space right now.
Yeah, Stanley, you're making a lot of points, and the points are really very relevant, and I'm writing some of them down. So in this last session now, you've made a point around fighting for space, which is competition. So you're saying that as a sports product, you're fighting for space with music, with movies, with entertainment. And you say again that we're not just fighting for space with the physical, we're fighting for space with the virtual. You're saying that we're fighting, and I like that, for the hearts, the minds, the wallets of the consumer. And you're saying that we must have a value proposition that is relevant. And you've identified a big problem. And that big problem is that today, 60% of the African population is under the age of 25. And because of that age range, they are more involved in technology, international consumption, and so on and so forth. So how do we build sports brands that can be relevant for that young audience when most of the administrators of the clubs and the rest of them are old? That is that is really, really critical.
Yes, it's a good question, and I think just even before we get there, one has to take a step back, and we have to be able to crawl before we can walk, and walk before we can jog, and jog before we can run. And the high end of what we speak about in terms of the capacity and where the industry is moving at the moment at a rapid speed, we first have to look at the core product, the quintessential product that's available to us right now, and what the product should look like. And at the moment, unfortunately, the very core product, because the content that we're talking about, the relevance that we're talking about, the engagement and connection with the consumer that we're talking about, can only really be as good as the product showcases it to be. So when I go to a match in Africa, any country, anywhere on the African continent, and I'm going to a local football match, what is my experience going to be? When I get home that night, how am I going to describe it? Am I going to describe it that I went to the stadium and had a fantastic experience, a holistic experience that wasn't just about the 90 minutes of go watch the game, go home? Because these days, people turn things into festivals. These days, events are for people to come together and to connect and to socialize and to feel part of something. So the pre-match entertainment, the in-match entertainment, the post-match entertainment, these are part and parcel of the experience of the global consumer who's spending money in and around the stadium and monetizing the club. The experience on the African continent is not that. The experience is that I'm going to have a nightmare to get to the stadium because of traffic and parking. I'm going to be lucky to get parking anywhere close to the stadium precinct. I'm going to make my way through the stadium gates with pushing and shoving and maybe not as many access gates open as should be. I'm going to come into a stadium that a lot of the time is 80% empty. I go to the bathroom, there may not be toilet paper in the bathroom, there may not even be running water in the bathroom. If I'm lucky enough to be a VIP guest, I sometimes can find I can't even get still mineral water to drink during the game. I should just be thirsty for 90 minutes. There's no snacks or food and beverage available to me. There's no dress codes. The seats are dusty and haven't even been dusted, before the game. We should just sit in our suits or in our clothes, on bird waste and on dust. Now, that's not a pleasurable experience. That's not an experience that I want to take a marketing manager to of a major corporation to say, come and invest in me, come and invest in my club, come and invest in the environment that my league is offering you. That's what needs to happen, and that's why I think certainly for us in South Africa, we feel very blessed to have a football infrastructure that has sponsored cup competitions and good club licensing and minimum standards. And that if you go to any Premier Soccer League match in South Africa, there's no way that certain boxes can't be ticked, otherwise that club can't play in the league. If you don't provide food and beverage in your VIP hospitality and media areas, you get fined and you get docked. Now, that's the type of thing that, the discipline up and down Africa is not there to enforce that. And the major reason for that is the systemic challenges, that we have in African League football. And, there's many we could talk about, but I think to focus on four in preparation for this talk, I really had to think about, I look at the challenges when I go into a territory to work for SuperSport. There's a checklist of about 28 items that I have to go through about the football ecosystem and environment, whether it's conducive to invest into that environment or not. And I've got to go through all of those challenges. But the biggest four, which I'll put to you and the group to really think about. The first thing is, like I just kind of described, is the infrastructure of the match day event. Because at the end of the day, the match day event is culminating in a match day experience. That's what the fan has to buy into. That's what this COVID crisis has taught us, that football without fans, it's not the same product. You can have a television component, you can fake the sound of the crowds, you can put virtual fans so that the screen doesn't look, too barren. You can try and create that artificial atmosphere. But the fact is that without fans, there's no game. And, the fans and the players are the two things that need to be at the center point of our thinking. But football has tended over the years to be dominated more by the administrative type of thinking. We're more administrator dominant as opposed to player dominant or fan dominant. And part of that is, as I said, the infrastructure challenge, because we don't have the same facilities and infrastructure that some of the more global leagues have. The African economies haven't been able to, without having to being hosted of a World Cup, for example, where we got fantastic infrastructure. But if you don't have that, you're relying on the government and other kind of spend where there's other needs that sport's competing with. Like I said to you, he's fighting for space. You're also fighting for space in the public arena. The government distributes funds, and it's got to be thinking about education, health and welfare, schools, road infrastructure, and other stuff. So, the sports product, the handball court, the netball court, the basketball court, the football stadium, that's really far down on the agenda. And every now and then you can be lucky enough to have a minister of sport or government initiative which comes along and pushes some advance in some of the more newer stadiums that I've seen up and down Africa. Has been very nice to see. But there's not as much, there's not a proliferation of that. It's the exception, not the rule. Generally the standards of the stadiums are a little bit low on infrastructure. That's number one. Number two is the skills capacity. And I think that's got to, be right up there, right high up there, that very often, and especially for me, I'm very lucky to have dealt with many of the presidents and chairmen of the leagues and the chairmen of clubs. And at those levels, you find that the vision and the understanding, the acumen, and the expertise that's there is fantastic and as good as anything in the world. But when that information and the system and what needs to happen, the execution element, the operational element of the clubs, not the leadership level, the owners and the chairman and the high level stuff, but the implementers of the operations of a club, from the kit managers to the medical and scientific support team, the technical coaching staff, the administration, the marketing, the finance, the legal, the infrastructure around the product. There's a massive skills gap. And we find that, some poor GM of a club is made to be like, the CEO and the driver and the kit manager and the marketing manager. He's pumping balls, he's cutting oranges, he's conducting radio interviews, and he's washing the kit. So the infrastructure of the clubs itself, not just the stadium, the bricks and mortar, but the structure of clubs in terms of the staffing, the organograms, the composition of what a club looks like. And I understand why that one-man show is doing those 5 jobs, because when I was in amateur football, that I was that man. I was the guy fetching, the drinks and washing the laundry for the players and giving the team talk at half-time. I was a one-stop shop. And that's how amateur football generally is. But if we're going to change the mindset and we're going to change the landscape and we're going to have an impact and really, shift the thinking of African football, and I honestly believe that, Dr. Motsepe, who's just been elected as president of CAF, because I've seen through his football club what his understanding of building a brand is. And I'm hopeful that there'll be some fresh initiatives that come in that help us all think about how to bridge this skills capacity, the skills gap between senior management at club level and the leadership of the clubs, and then the implementers of the clubs. That for me is a big challenge. Then the third thing is governance. The lack of corporate confidence in the African football product, because generally speaking, 8 times out of 10, there's going to be a breach of contract, a violation of trust, a breakdown of communication, a promise that was promised but not delivered. And at the end of the day, corporates deal in a very a straight black and white world. There's not as much grey as there is in football. But sometimes we'll enter into contracts with one party, and then when another deal comes along that looks a little bit more attractive, we'll find a way, to get the next best thing, as opposed to like sticking with what you committed to, and upholding the name of football. Where every time a club or a player or a sponsor violates a contract, it's a break of the trust of brand African football. When Aubameyang's sitting on the bench for the London derby, and the whole world is told he's sitting on the bench for disciplinary reasons, it feeds into the narrative that, you see, because, African players don't have the discipline. But, when a Croatian or a South American or, somebody else plays up, when Dimitri Payet refuses to go to training at West Ham because he's forcing a move in another country, nobody says, the European, no discipline. When Harry Maguire gets arrested, on holiday in Mykonos for assaulting somebody, he goes back to life as the captain of Manchester United in England. And, if that was an African player, it would be like, how can we keep him? We must let him go. So these are the perceptions that feed into the narrative, and we have to break that narrative through strong corporate governance, through respecting contracts, through under-promising and over-delivering. I think that's a very big aspect. And then the two other aspects which round up for me, the starting point of the challenges of African football is then the structure of clubs themselves. There are too many clubs on the African continent that are not privatized. I'm talking about professional clubs now. That are not privatized. They're either institutional clubs or, structured in another way that's not conducive to professional football leagues, professional football structures, the distribution of commercial gains. When leagues sell their rights collectively and distribute the funds amongst their member clubs, this is a legal and commercial, transaction and situation that needs to be governed. And when you enter into the realm of having to deal with, for example, the army or, the Air Force or the police, the revenue service, the governor, when you're dealing with that kind of environment, it's almost impossible to run efficiently as a sports business, because we have to make decisions quickly. We can't wait for the governor to come back from his trip, abroad. We can't wait, to pass through 7 layers of bureaucracy because we're feeding into the military. We need clubs to be able to commit to things, to comply to things, to be governed by things as a central body with our football bodies, with our respective footballers' federations, with the Confederation of African Football, and with FIFA. So we need to comply with as good a best practice as the rest of the world is doing in the business of football. We can't want to be part of the business eco-structure of football and participate on equal grounds or similar grounds or competitive grounds. But on the other hand, we say, no. But, for us, our clubs are structured differently, and we have other complications that make it, impractical and unviable to maximize your commercial gain. And then the final thing is obviously the television product, because the bottom line is, and you've mentioned handball, and the real truth is, when you're in a sport that doesn't get so much TV time, you're up against it. You've got a challenge. You've got a funding challenge, because interest and exposure and mileage. Corporates aren't only in sports. Some are for altruistic reasons and with genuine reasons, and many corporates, thank God, up and down Africa contribute to the landscape by being very benevolent and sponsoring things and enabling activities that which or should be the responsibility sometimes, of other people, but the corporates come in and they do it. And we've got to gain that corporate trust. We've got to gain it, and the only way we can gain it and add value is by giving mileage and exposure. Now, today we have a very wonderful opportunity that the whole world has become a cameraman. Every single person now is his own TV producer. That's a fact. Your television is your TV production. And if you get the right content, if you get the right shots, if you get stuff that appeals to people, then you get 1 million followers and 2 million followers. Suddenly you're earning money from YouTube and this and that. And you're living in a world that's, is completely transformed and different. So I think that if we can address the systemic challenges and give ourselves a good foundation of consistent governance and confidence from the corporate sector, with an enhanced television product that reflects the gains that we're making on the ground. If we get that right, then money flows as a natural consequence. But when we're chasing and 14 of the 16 clubs are letting you down in your league, in every league, what I've seen is there's 2 or 3 clubs that are doing an amazing job, that are putting in a lot of resource and effort and energy, that are applying strong fundamental principles, of club management and sponsorship management and rights management. They're doing good stuff. But the other 12, 13 clubs or so are bringing them down. And you can only be as strong as your weakest club. And that's how we need to be thinking moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stanley. So now, if you want to look at an organogram, what is an ideal organogram for a club?
Yeah, look, I mean, we could talk for hours about that. I've been lucky enough to travel around the world to 48 different countries, looking at their football infrastructure from national centers of excellence in France and the UK and America, Australia, at club level across Europe and up and down Africa, really doing an audit on clubs basically, and looking at how our club structured. Our club participated, my own personal club participated in a FIFA club audit just about 7 months ago. And when you run through that checklist of stuff, there's a lot of scope and variety for people to structure their own type of environment. But essentially, you're looking at 3 fundamental building blocks. The first one is the sporting infrastructure. So that's your technical team, whether it's your director of football, your technical director, your head coach, whatever your structure is. But around the team, from the technical team, the sports science and medical team, the physiotherapist, the doctor, the biokineticist, the podiatrist, the masseuse. A lot of these things most clubs up and down Africa don't employ. But these are the things that are needed in terms of having a professional type of sporting a unit that the players fall under, so that they can be looked after well. When they're injured, they get rehabilitated well. They get managed well in terms of their loading on their physical conditioning and their general welfare. So that's the sporting side. Then there's the administrative side, which kind of supports that. But, your team management, your travel, your logistics, your registration with the league, your compliance with your league and your federation, your national team call-ups, the running of the club, the sorting out of the kit, the management of your kit inventory, the setting up of your supporter fan base, your human resource function, your financial management and legal management within the club, your chief executive officer and his team. That's the administrative engine. So your organogram needs to talk to that. So I would never come here and say, first you must have a board of directors, and then you must have a CEO, and then you must have an MD or a CFO or a COO. Titles and structures, sometimes they talk to you and sometimes they don't. In my club, I've got a very flat structure where titles mean nothing. My marketing manager also does event management. He also sometimes is a team manager. and when I need him, he's a driver. So, everybody does everything in the club. My head of operations, sometimes has to do things that are way out of where he is, especially during COVID. My data analyst, we haven't even touched on data analysis, but my data analyst at my club became my COVID officer, because he was the most suitable for the job. So people have to be flexible, and so I don't buy into traditional organograms. I think you've got to get in the right people on the bus, and then whatever your job title you want to give them, as long as it fits in with your narrative. So you have to have a sporting element, you have to have an administrative element, and then there's the commercial element. Obviously also links to your lawyer and your tax and stuff, but I'm talking more about how to monetize the club. How to position the club for commercial success. If you have TV rights, you've got a good start. But if you don't have TV rights, so where do you find your money from? Traditionally, clubs will get their money in the following ways, if not from TV rights. They're going to get it from sponsorship of jersey, or some element of sponsorship around their club. They're going to get it from gate receipts. They're going to get it from prize money. They're going to get it from sale of perimeter boards. And of course, if your league is running so unprofessional that you don't have perimeter boards, or your club's only putting 2 pop-up A-frames around the field and thinking that that's brand management, then you're not going to maximize commercial gain in that space. So perimeter boards have a value. In my games, I sell my perimeter boards for 1 million rand a board. So, to understand, if a club's allocated 14 boards out of the 36 boards, then it's very nice for me to know that I've got 14 million rand sitting there, because it's 1 million rand a board. As an example of commercialization. In Africa, we struggle with the merchandise element, because our guys would prefer to buy on the black market a cheap knockoff version of the kit and pay $1 instead of $30, and so we don't generally make fortunes as African clubs selling replica jerseys as they do in other parts of the world. So that's a revenue stream that's a little bit lesser for us. And then, of course, what clubs get pushed into is when they don't have TV rights or sponsorship or gate receipts or prize money or perimeter board sales or merchandise money, then the money has to come from the owner, or you have to sell players. So now in many leagues in Africa, you can't even sell players because there's no viable transfer market, because most of the clubs aren't sponsored, because there aren't TV rights. So, in that kind of environment, a person with his own resources, a man of means, a lady of means, an owner of means, would come in and own a club and be able to dominate. Because it's just about, if you look at league tables around the world, generally you can go and do the exercise afterwards yourself, take the top 7 leagues in the world, and then look at what they spend, and then do the league table. And you will see that there's a 70-80% correlation between spend and performance. Manchester City spend the most, Manchester City will win the league. Mamelodi Sundowns spend the most, Mamelodi Sundowns will win the league. Now, yes, you'll get every now and then a Leicester City or a surprise element, producing above its means. Financially, they may be 9th or 10th on the league table, but they're sitting 5th or 6th. So when you do that kind of exercise, then it's very easy for you to start seeing who are the overperforming managers, as an example. Which managers, or which recruitment policies, which clubs structures. So when I look at that and I see the clubs that are punching above their weight in the world of finance, that's where I know that the intellectual capital is strong, because it means that they're doing things to keep them where they are, smarter than other people with more resources. And I think that's a big clue, and also a big up for young students and young people coming into sport, is that, at the end of the day, if you deliver, people want to have you around. Most of my staff that have been with me for between 15 and 20 years started as interns, started as volunteers, started as people that put their hands up and said, I just want to be involved in the club. And then they showed me that they were valuable and I couldn't afford to lose them. But today we have a culture where we want to get the rewards and benefits before we've even served. before we've even contributed, before we've even changed the landscape? Why must the club owner take $1 single out of his pocket and give it to you? That's what you have to ask yourself as a player, as a member of staff, as admin, as sporting, as commercial. When you're in any of those three blocks, you have to say, what value am I adding to this football club to make it a greater institution, a better organization? What am I bringing to the party that's changing the narrative of this football club or this story? And if your answers are very ordinary or non-existent, then you're probably just plodding along, and you're not going to make the leaps and strides that you might hope. But when you take on more and you do more for less, without looking at your watch every 5 minutes, wondering when you're going to get an increase, when you're going to get a promotion, when you're going to move to your next job because you're bored with this one. And that is a problem. Like I'm saying, obviously for me, I'm on the other end of the extreme. I've been 20 years with one football club. It's a very rare situation. It's not a common situation. But what's not nice in football at the moment is the culture that starts with the players and is now spreads around. That I go to a club, I'm there for 2 years or 3 years. I'm a free agent. I move to the next one and the next one and the next one. It's hard to build brands with constant movement like that. If I showcase a player and I'm spending money on putting him front and center as a brand ambassador for my club, but next year he's playing for my opposition, last year's marketing spend was spent on this year's opposition, if you think about it. So, that's the reality. If I'm spending and I'm putting my star player up, to get sponsorship, to do things, and he's my brand ambassador, and I spend valuable time and money and on his salary and investing in him and building him as a brand ambassador, but next year he's going to trot out for my fiercest opponent on the field of play, he's taking my sponsorship away. So you have to think very carefully about the way you construct your brand and the way you construct your storyboard in terms of how you build your club, your brand, and the individuals within it, because you need to have hooks on which to hang your marketing plan. If you want to say, where am I being involved with the community? Which brand ambassadors am I using to carry my message? What impact am I having in the community? How am I changing a life? How am I opening up an opportunity? How am I being relevant to my community, to the audience that I want to engage with my club, so that I can get more Twitter followers, so that I can get more Instagram? That gives the power to go to a sponsor and say, my club's got 200,000 followers, 300,000 followers, 400,000 followers. Not to say, if you give me money, I'll build the best Twitter following for you. And that's the culture in Africa, is to say, first give me money, and then I'm going to show you what I can do. No. Companies want to see what you could do without money, and when they see that, they know that you can fly with their money and they can give it to you with confidence. And that balance of, what comes first, the chicken or the egg. We think we can only make progress when we get money. But if we don't change that paradigm shift, if we don't find innovative ways of making an impact without the money and having a value system that's independent of money, if we don't have a value system, if you ask a club, why do you exist? Why are you here? Is it for the chairman's ego? Is it for a community? Is it to win things? Is it to sell players? Why have you got is it because the owner just loves the team, or his dad had the team, or what is it? And I don't think that many clubs in Africa answer the question, why are we here? What are we doing?
Very, very interesting points. Very interesting points again. But I want us to speak to the brand. How do you construct a team brand?
I think, first of all, the brand itself can't be in isolation. So when you talk about club planning and having a strategic plan, you have to look at all the elements from the annual budget that you want to set, because if you don't know at the outset, what's my budget? And I think a lot of clubs go into the season with a kind of an open checkbook in a way, like we'll just, as we go along, and then they kind of find out 3/4 of the way through, oops, we ran out of money. because, there will always be things that come up. So I think the starting point is, what's our point of departure? What's our strategic plan? What's the annual budget that we want to set? And once we know that this is our parameters in terms of the resources that we have at our disposal, how best can we utilize those resources to meet the objectives and aims of the club? What I said before, why are we here? For my club was established as a marketing tool to represent a television broadcast company and show ways that clubs could be innovative and make a difference, change lives, have an impact, particularly in the youth model. So we've built our club on the value proposition of having the best academy of 2, 3, 4, 5, this year 6 players promoted from our youth academy. Now that stands for our brand, but if I finish 8th or if I finish 3rd, it doesn't really matter to me and my board, as long as we keep producing young players and doing good things, making sure that our players make through. At the moment, we've got players 4 in the national under-17 team, 5 in the national under-20 team, 4 in the under-23 Olympic team, and 3 in Bafana. So if we have a measuring tool of success that doesn't only depend on trophies, if 16, 18, 20 clubs a year go into a tournament to win, there's going to be 19 losers. Are we saying that we're playing in an industry where we 19 out of 20 of the participants and all their followers are losers? No, because we have to have different standards and definition of what is success. What does winning mean in this context? And winning in this context, means your own individual aims. Sometimes a club chairman will want to have visibility and he will want to have an impact and he'll want to broaden his reach across business sectors, and he's quite happy to lose a certain amount of money in the club because the reach that the club gives him access to mining contracts or commercial contracts, tenders, other awards in sectors and spaces where we haven't even thought about. Because most club owners are men of means, they're involved in other things that made them their money, and their real core interest is not actually the football. Supersport United is a very small part of Supersport International's reach. Our business is television. The football club is just a little small thing where we can showcase one tiny element of what we're about. But, our other properties, our sponsorship of leagues, our sponsorship of cups, our sponsorship of development initiatives and corporate social investment programs, grassroots programs, the kind of coverage and investment we're giving to codes around the country and the storyboards that we're telling to try create heroes and to try create leagues that can attract corporate sponsorship. This is our contribution. So we don't mind losing money in our football club. We don't mind if a player leaves our club and goes to play for Orlando Pirates or Kaizer Chiefs or Mamelodi Sundowns. It doesn't bother us too much because we're not there to try and be a Mamelodi Sundowns, Orlando Pirates or Kaizer Chiefs. We're there to try and have a different kind of impact that talks to the vision and mission and value statement of our shareholders. And each chairman and each business might have a different strategy of why they're involved. Some of the institutional teams were born out of very noble reasons where institutions wanted to give their staff and their families activity and interest and engagement and enjoyment, on the social side. So some of the companies and institutions, I remember being in Kenya and there was a flower company that was exporting millions and millions of rands worth of flowers. Flowers was their business. They weren't interested in football. But football was a way of giving back to the community, a way of giving back to the staff and the employees and the thousands of people employed in that flower industry, to say to them and to show them that they were part of something bigger and to give them a sense of pride in what they belonged to. He was happy to lose money in his football club, and make 50, 100 times more in his core business. Now, that's a smart way of utilizing a football club. But many people go into a football club for thinking that they want to just win trophies or win money or sell players or get rich quick. if you're going in with those kind of intentions, you're not going to last, and you're not going to build a lasting institution. Brands like Al Ahly, are very strong brands. If you go to Ghana and you talk about Asante Kotoko or Hearts of Oak, Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates, Power Dynamos, up and down the continent, Township Rollers in Botswana, every country has certain brands that are very strong and stable, but they've stood the test of time. And then you get the fly-by-nights and you look over 10 years, how many different teams have entered and exited leagues? It's not healthy for the game, when over a 5-year period of a young man's life, half the league that he was involved with and supporting doesn't play anymore. They don't exist. They've dropped out. They're gone. But that guy spent his money on a jersey, and he spent his money coming to a game, and he put his heart into it because he loved the team, and he put the player up on his wall. He put his mind into it because he was interested in it all the time, and he put his wallet into it and spent money behind it. And then guess what? The owners and the other people didn't match that guy's passion and his heart, mind, and wallet. They neglected it, and now the club's gone. And so that undermines a value. So when you talk about how do you build a brand, it's the building blocks of the strategic plan, the budget, of course the core product in terms of football, the club licensing, making sure that you're delivering and being a club of good standing within your league, within your federation. Not that there's disciplinary cases against you and countless examples when players haven't been paid or been mistreated or contracts terminated or violated. You want to have a clean record. That's what a brand is about. A brand is about what people say about you when you're not there. What's their first thought that comes into their mind when they hear your name or they hear the name of your club? What goes through their mind? That very first thought. That's pretty much your brand, and if it's negative, it's a problem. So, I think that's the biggest part of how to build a brand, and then of course respecting contracts and delivering what we promise. That upholds your brand. If I go to the shops and every third or fourth Coca-Cola that I open has something inside it, a piece of paper or an article that spoils it, or I open a chocolate and it's melted or it's stale, that hurts a brand. And it's that ongoing experience that you have, like whether you say, is it good or is it bad? Is it good or is it bad? And we have to ask that as football. Did this person have a good or bad experience with me today when they came to watch my team? Because we watch our teams, we're very emotional. We're only watching the soccer, whether we won, whether we lost. If we won, we were happy. We don't worry about anything else. If we lost, we want to blame the coach, the players. We're looking for the problems. But we don't stop for a minute to say, the fan that paid $5 now to come and watch my team, did he get value? Is he going home thinking he got his $5 worth? Or am I too worried about the fact that I won or lost to even care about whether my fan got $5 value or not? Okay. So a brand can only be built on consumer confidence. Okay.
Excellent. Now you mentioned innovation, and specifically you spoke about a data analyst. What does a data analyst do in today's game?
Well, I can speak for my data analyst. I mean, obviously, there's data analysts that do very lot because they've got a lot of resources. Data analysts generally analyze as much information as possible. It can range from football-specific items, how many kilometers a player ran in a game. Most of us play with a GPS tracking system nowadays. Well, certainly in South Africa, most of the clubs have got the GPS tracking system on the player, so we can see how far he ran, the distance that he covered, his lung capacity when he was running, so we can tell the exact point in the game as to when he is starting to tire, when his heart rate starts to exhibit signs of strain and fatigue. We can actually read that off the GPS monitor. We know how far he runs. We know who he passes to, how many times. So we'll know in a game a player made 80 passes, 33 were to this player, 21 were to this player, 5 were to this player. We can work out from our own team where the fluidity and our game plan is revolving around. And obviously everything we do, we can also do for the opposition. So when we analyze opposition, their set pieces, when they take corners, who's covering at the back on the halfway line for them, who goes up for the corners, who's making near post runs, far post runs. So all analysis about the game itself through various software packages that are available. You can buy cut and paste ones from companies where they provide the information to you and charge you a fee. There are also other ones that you can utilize yourself in a way, a little bit more self-empowering and lower cost, obviously. That they're very expensive to analyze data. But once one or two teams start to do it, they see the competitive advantage very easily. It's not difficult because the computer does it quick and easy for you. You can see the main streams of where you want to break up player in another team. You can see which 2 or 3 players are central to their build up, their assists and their goals. So when you want to disrupt the other team, you can focus much easier on how to disrupt. And I think you've seen that around the world now. Teams can cancel each other out quite quickly. So you can have a team like Liverpool that dominated very much last year, and then all the teams have the same data analysis available to them. And once they work out, this is how we squash them, this is how we stop them. Whether it's saying, okay, first we block Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, and then we dry up their wing play because 63% of their goals came from assists from wide areas. When you now they have to find a new way of playing because everybody's cottoned onto it. So, it's changes so fast there. In Africa, we can have a couple of years head start. That's why a coach like Pitso Mosimane is successful. He's been using data for the last 15 years. He was using data when he was still at Supersports in 2003-04, where there was no data really available. We were doing our own little capturing package where we used to click in a different manual way. Now the computer does it for you very, very easily. We've got a software system at our training ground, 5 cameras permanently installed that tracks friendly games and training. So we can actually do the same thing that we're doing at matches, we're doing at training. We can analyze very, very easily and quickly and show the players where they're going wrong. And nowadays, a lot of the player preparation, because there's so many games, it's not so much in the old days like train. It's often now, like when we play Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then Tuesday, we've got 4 games in the space of 16 days. You can't do training. So a lot of the emphasis now is maintenance of the physicality and working very hard on the tactical side of the game, of understanding the movement and the strategy, of the coordination and how you want to play. That tactical component has been brought out a lot stronger than in the old days, where a coach used mainly motivation and, come on and desire and, that kind of thing. It's gone. The day of a coach who was good at making rah-rah with the players and firing them up, it can last you a game if you're lucky. Now we're being driven by facts. We know who scores where, how does he score with his left foot, his right foot, his head, which way must you point him to the byline when he's going at you, because where the majority of his strengths are. So the data analyst's job is to really crush that data for us. He also extends into my team data so that I know how many minutes all my players have played. That means my finance guy can calculate the cost per minute per player for me, so that I can have a good understanding of which players I'm going to let go first, because the players that offer the least value per minute are the players that I don't want to hold on to. Players that are giving me high value per minute are players I want to hold on to. So in the succession planning of the club and how we balance the books and which players have to come in and which players need to be released, the data analyst drives a lot of that by the information that he gives me. He also has to do other stuff like, the weather checks and things like that, to give the coach all the information, even the condition of the pitch that we're going to play. Our management team fly out in advance and go and have a look at the pitch. So we're on top of exactly, what we're facing, when we get there, and the hotel's set up, and the bus is set up, and the transport set up, and the team meals are set up, and the training venue set up. So, the back end of that, the data analyst is involved in providing as much information on the opposition on our team, and then, of course, crucially, on our scouting network. So the data analyst is the one who will scour the internet and all around the world to bring to me the various options. If I say I'm looking for a left back between the ages of 24 and 28, or I want him to be an overlapping left back, or I want him to be able to play in a 4-4-2 or a 3-5-2, or I want him to be a left wing back, or I want him to be able to play left side centre back and left back, and then he's got to give me all those type of options of players in Africa who are available either for free or what kind of transfer fee they may command, and whether we want to pursue interest in such a player or not. So that he integrates very strongly with the scouting department. He's not himself a scout, if you know what I mean, but obviously from a scouting perspective, he plays a big role in managing our scouting database, in watching which players are playing regularly. When we build a database of players to track and one player suddenly starts being on the bench or picks up an injury, that's the kind of thing we monitor to see, now a player that we thought was quite good, but he just had a cruciate knee ligament operation, let's focus our energies on the other three left backs that we were looking at, because, that guy is a high risk to us. Or that left back, the club wants $200,000. Okay, it's too much. So the commercial end is driven by data. And it's the same in marketing, by the way, and I think it's a very important point. Many of the clubs go into their sponsorship proposals and their whole approach about managing sponsors and stakeholders without any research. They don't give the sponsor a sense of the size of the market, the size of the league, the size of their club, their reach of their community, their target markets, what kind of money is being spent in other regions in this area, what other things are taking place in this space to give the corporate the confidence that, hey, these guys are onto something because this is what's happening all around the world. And you only have to take esports as an example. Esports 3-4 years ago, not much. Today, esports teams and players, a player to go and play for a certain esports team representing a company can be sold for more than $1.5–2 million. A player who's playing on a computer game, the last esports gamer who was sold for $1.4 million was 12 years old. He's a 12-year-old kid. And you know where he's from? Africa.
Wow.
Yeah. Over $1 million as a 12-year-old e-gamer. And you say to yourself, how did this kid become this? First of all, you ask, how can anyone pay $1.4 million for an e-gamer? But that's the size of the market. And if that doesn't shake your cage, and if that doesn't make you say, whoa, I'm still dealing with my football club. I haven't even moved into the virtual world. So, we've got to start picking up the pace in Africa to catch up. It's not easy for us. We don't start on a level playing field with the other countries of the world. They've got a big head start in terms of their infrastructure and environment, and then the support that many of them get from government. Germany and Spain, they see their leagues, and England, as ambassadors to their national brands. So, the English Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, these are brands that the country is proud of. Now, we need to make our countries proud too. And, they're getting a lot of support from their cities. A city like Barcelona, what the team attracts and what it means to the city in tourism and hospitality and exposure and investment, it plays a bigger part in the fabric. And that's why I asked that fundamental question, who are we and why are we here?
That question is very fundamental. Two more questions and then we'll close. The first one is, looking at your data again, do you have a fan database? Do you use any form of CRM system?
Personally, we don't have a huge database. So from me, having a big fan base wasn't one of the objectives of my club in a way. Like, we prefer to play in the virtual space. We're very high up on social media, for example, but in crowds and supports, I've probably got about 8,000 followers. I normally get about 5,000 to a game. So it's not bad, but it's not enough to sustain the club in commercial terms, and we don't really chase that. We're happy to have a following, but we don't chase it aggressively. I think for us it's about being smart, about having a good reach in the social media platforms, about creating beautiful stories, young kids that have come through our club and gone on to big things. We create a lot of storytelling around our club, and we try and showcase individual successes instead of trying to bite off too much. So we'll try and drive individual projects and individual successes and build on those, as opposed to trying to be too much to too many people too quickly, because we don't have the resources and the capacity to do that. So, from our perspective, it's about trying to box smart and trying to make a genuine impact, like making a real difference.
Okay, excellent. So the final question is, if you look at African clubs, which one would you consider to be the most admired brand for you?
I'm a little bit, I'm biased, obviously, because I'm in a country where we have 3 really fantastic brands, that have epitomized different elements. Mamelodi Sundowns under Dr. Motsepe have had a foundation across their jersey, old school Barcelona style, in terms of making an impact in the community. And Dr. Motsepe himself, utilizing Sundowns, has done tremendous community work in bringing other elements to the fore through football. So, for example, a lot of religious faith days and music festivals and modeling shows and fashion shoots, and like bringing a sexiness to football, having cheerleaders and putting on great shows at Soccer X and World Exhibition Forums, leaders and stuff like that. Dr. Motsepe hasn't been afraid to step into the international space and showcase his brand in a very, very strong way, getting the best of breed in terms of administrators and coaches, not being afraid to pay top dollar and back his vision, very much with solid infrastructure, very good youth academy, stands for a lot. But the 2 big brands in South Africa that I would say, like for me, epitomize what global football is about is Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates. They've built unbelievable brands and became national brands. I mean, most clubs, we have our location in a certain region and we have a following in a certain space, and then when even Sundowns, for example, are very strong in Tshwane, in Pretoria, in their area, but they won't have the same kind of reach in Cape Town or Durban or Bloemfontein. But Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates will fill out any stadium in any province in the country. So that, for me, speaks to the brands that they've built, and having the trust and the faith and the following, the hearts, minds and wallets, if you like, of not only the consumer and the fan, but also corporate South Africa has got behind them in a very strong way. So those 2 brands are very strong. Whether you look at Kaizer Chiefs with Nike or Orlando Pirates with Adidas, they've merged with these 2 big kit providers, partners, sponsors who are world class, who are dealing with world-class athletes, who are dealing with world-class clubs, who understand activation, experiential marketing, brand management, and funkiness more than anybody else. So if in a way, they've been smart, because if you partner with that kind of brand, you feed into that kind of narrative. You can see me here, I'm wearing Umbro. Now, Umbro is my sponsor. I partner with them. Their initiatives, for example, in the e-gaming space, they've just opened up an e-gaming portal. I don't bother to recreate a wheel and try and start my own e-gaming from scratch and have to invest my own money and find my own e-gamers and worry about all of that. I'm trying to worry about staying in my league and keeping afloat and finding the money. I can't start worrying about that stuff. So it's fantastic to be able, to have the capacity to say to my partners, Umbro, you guys manage this section, we'll feed into your thing. We get more fans and database off their Twitter following, because now Umbro around the world has a big following. They're sponsoring clubs in different leagues all around the world. Same like Nike, same like Adidas. So I think Chiefs and Pirates have done that very, very well with Nike and Adidas. They've got powerful, dynamic marketing teams, both of them, dedicated marketing teams. If you go to their boardroom table at a marketing meeting, there's 15, 16 people around the table. It's not like one guy, or thinking about something when he woke up in the middle of the night, and that's the marketing plan. They've got a very best of breed dynamic marketing teams. They're very funky, and they've managed to cross their brand over from being a pure soccer or sports play to being a lifestyle and leisure brand. So a lot of the off-field stuff, the hoodies, the speakers, the merchandise, the paraphernalia that comes with the clubs, they spot on in those areas where a lot of the other clubs don't invest in that type of thing. It's like the replica and a flag or something, But, they've gone the length and breadth of merchandising capacity, from towels and alarm clocks and iPad covers, and really taking their brand and making it relevant in every space for every consumer, whether it's a keyring or a pen or a wallet or whatever you use in any aspect of your life. A COVID face mask, there's Pirates and Chiefs COVID face masks out there by the thousands. So they've built good, funky brands. And then, of course, they support them with excellent campaigns. I mean, they're very innovative in the way that they go about creating events for themselves. The Carling Black Label Cup, for example, where a lucky fan, gets to be the coach of Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs for a day, go sit in the dugout with the team, say the tactics, give the team talk, and live a dream. That's a crazy, crazy experiential campaign. It's bold, it's brave, it's out the box, and it took South Africa by storm. And in so doing, those two clubs created millions and millions of rands for themselves in gate receipts, in commercial sponsorship, and in brand relevance. By creating an event for themselves, which of course had appealed to television, so then sponsorship was easy. And when I look at that event, Carling Black Label Cup is one of many that Chiefs and Pirates have invented over the years, from certain soccer spectaculars that they've put together to Vodacom challenges and other things. So if you go up and down the whole spectrum of what a football brand should be, partner with best of breed international brands like Nike and Adidas, have powerful management teams, that are very strong with best of breed intellectual capital, engage in funky campaigns that are relevant to the young consumer and the old consumer, old traditional lifestyle stuff, but then funky stuff as well for the ladies. For example, they'll go across the range. They don't just have a replica for men. There's an actual ladies replica cut. Now, on the African continent, sometimes we don't see the ladies as so important. We've got quite a strong gender bias that football's our domain and women are kind of like, strangers in our environment, or if they are welcome, they're kind of welcome, but with one eye, kind of like, how much does she really know because she's a woman and I'm a guy? And that mentality also limits us, because by having that kind of mindset, we're tapping into only half a consumer market when we could be engaging another 51%. And in actual fact, women are more consumer oriented than men. They spend more time in shopping centers and buying and doing than men, and their influence over their children and what their children consume is much stronger than men. So, that kind of thinking, of paradigm shift, where Chiefs and Pirates have been progressive and catered for their full markets, their virtual markets. They have very fully fledged esports gaming teams that compete in like the African Cup of Nations esports gaming challenge. And they do things that make you proud to be a South African and to be an African. And up and down the continent, obviously for me, you have the TP Mazembes and the Al Ahlis, and the strong teams, the Gor Mahias in Kenya, and you have these teams that are strong, but they still have a little capacity, I think, to move up and to become like mega brands, to become superpowers, and to take the rest of the league with them. So I think that for sports clubs, teams, leagues, to think about across the board, whether it's football or in other sports, I think that the first starting point is, do we have committed stakeholders? The shareholders, the owners, the people driving those entities. What's the objective? Are they committed? What's their vision? And if those boxes are all ticked and you've got a good starting point, of having committed shareholders that have a vision, that have a mission, that have an understanding of where they're going. I think sometimes we get unrealistic and, we start a club and then we think next year we're going to win the Premier League. It's a case of understanding, like for my club, we start every season. Our number one objective is just to stay in the league. If we're in the league next year, that's the first part of what a success, first measure of success. Second measure of success, let's try finish in the top 8. Third measure of success, let's try finish, as high as we can. But we don't set as an objective, we're going to go and win the league next year, because we know that we're not the most or the second most or the third most or the fourth most resourced team. So if we don't expect with the first 4 positions in the league, we give away. But if we're the 5th most resourced team in the league, I expect to finish 5th. And if I finish 6th or 7th or 8th, then I've underperformed by 1 or 2. It's not a train smash, but it's the way we analyze and evaluate on an ongoing basis. So unless you set realistic goals up front about what you want to achieve and what your impact is of the football club, what your goals and aims and objectives are for having that football club, is it to make money? Is it to give back? Is it to extend our reach or awareness? Is it to break into other networks? Is it to contribute to a community? Is it to get a tax write-off? Is it to increase our standing, in the commercial world and with corporate? So I think if we know what our objective is, that's a fantastic starting point of having a committed shareholders, stakeholders, owners, if you like. The next step is to have well-resourced, high-capacity, highly skilled, strong management teams. And I really mean management teams. Clubs and brands cannot grow on individuals. They can only grow when the various systems and organs and departments are all equally skilled, are all equally calibrated with high-end, well-skilled people as you can. If your marketing manager is poor because he's unqualified or has no experience or just doesn't have a clue, you're not going to make the inroads that you want to make. So you want to try and get people with the best knowledge. Oftentimes in clubs we see a lot of nepotism appointments and appointments for people based on who they are and not what they can bring to the party. Now, who you are is very important in terms of your qualities and your character, and many times character and attitude trumps qualifications and trumps experience. You can have the most qualified and experienced person in the room. If he has a bad attitude and he's not a team player, he's not going to add to the success of your team. No matter how talented and how amazing he is, he's going to go on and be amazing somewhere else, but your team won't have moved forward. But if you've got a group of unified people with the right attitude, with the right desire, with commitment, with discipline, with resilience, and with passion, then there's no reason why strides can't be made in each of the various departments. But I think strong management teams, strong administrations, strong technical, strong sports science, and in the other sports, in those areas, the areas are all the same. You're talking about facility management, you're talking about people management. And if the people are your staff or your players or your service providers or your suppliers, it's about managing the relationships with those people. And the facilities, the infrastructure, the equipment, from your kits to your balls, to your beacons, to your bibs, to your medical equipment, your ice baths, your massage tables, those are your assets, your inventory. And your stadium, many clubs they don't even have a signed lease agreement with their stadium. So how can you make a promise to a sponsor that I will do A, B, and C in these 15 games when you can't promise that? Because when you want to go and make the VIP area or the dugout branded for your sponsor and the stadium says, sorry mate, this is our stadium, you can't do that. And that's one of the biggest challenges we have, the disconnect between the stadium owners who have the rights to do certain things and the clubs who promise things to their sponsors that they can't deliver because they don't own those rights. The rights are actually held by a different rights holder completely. The municipality owns the stadium. The municipality can only sell the advertising. And yet before taking your games to that stadium, you haven't asked the question or signed the agreement that enables you to monetize your game in that stadium. Because we're just thinking about going to play the game. Oh, as long as we play the game, 90 minutes, we've got a stadium, we've got a field, we've got nets, we've got corner flags, we've got a referee, we've got a game. If we've got to get beyond that thinking, we've got to get to a level of a complete product, of an understanding of the overall product, and making sure that we can give a really good quality product to people, have the fiscal discipline, have the governance, and have some kind of sustainable funding model. If it means that you know that you're going to lose $1 million a year having your club, then you know that going in. So you can't cry afterwards if you lose $1 million. But if you haven't worked it out before, and then you find that you lost $1 million, you can't, get it back. You've done damage to yourself, you've done damage to the brand of football. So the starting point is knowing, do I have the building blocks in place? Have I got committed shareholders? Have I got a good, strong management team in mind that can manage my facilities, manage my resources, manage my equipment, manage my people? And then have I got good commercial and marketing people around me? Because it doesn't matter how good your product is. And many restaurants make the most beautiful steaks, amazing steaks imaginable, but they go bankrupt. Not because their steaks weren't good, but because they lacked the sizzle. They didn't sell the sizzle. They didn't sell to people how great their product was. And another person with an inferior product but a great marketing plan, he's selling off the shelf, and you don't understand what's going on. And that all comes to, how do we package our stuff? When I give out my business card, does it have the name of my club on it? Or is it, smatthews@gmail.com? Because, am I even showcasing my brand? You will not go to one single Premier League club in the English Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, the Eredivisie in the Netherlands, Serie A. You will not go to one single football club and find a single member of staff who ever gives you a business card that isn't branded the club. But you will not go to one club in Africa and get a business card with a club name on. Sometimes some guys even give you 3 business cards. Their card for the club with gmail.com, and then their real business in something else, of something else. Now, you can't expect a professional football environment bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue across the board, across all clubs, if your approach is like that. If you have interviews and what you actually are branding and showcasing is some other brand's water bottle at a hotel because you haven't bothered to put up good branding behind you or in front of you, or a tablecloth to drape the table at the hotel that you have your press conference, as an example. Or behind you after the match, your players having an interview, and you can see other people hugging and kissing and talking, and where what should be behind you is the name and brand of your league, of your club, of your sponsors, of the people you want to appeal to, because they're getting brand coverage at that interview. But you let it go by with 3 strange people talking in the background. They got the coverage. You let a golden opportunity of television branding pass you by. So if you don't have good, strong branding and commercial teams that have locked in, good proposals for companies, good contractual management, good rights management, then, at the end of the day, your success will be limited. So,
thank you very much, Stanley. It's been a very beautiful chat. We spent more time than we thought we would, but every minute's been really useful. Once more, I'll say thank you, and I'll surely come back to you.
Cool, Tunji. Thanks a lot, and I hope everything goes successful.